All right, I guess I'm gonna run this. I'm gonna run this without a camera. I'm a little new to streaming, so I just have the chat up on my phone. I don't own a webcam, but that's okay. We're looking at the project, not my face. So again, for the uninitiated, my name is Hairitage. I have a breakdown today of 40 cal with Rico Act. We're just going to kind of go through the basics, take a look at what I did, and I want to talk about concepts and really have everybody kind of take away not just what I did, but why I did something. We'll also talk about some things that now, over a year later, I probably would have preferred to change up or do. We'll kind of give as detailed as an inspection. So, feel free to ask questions in the chat, and we'll kind of just go from there. The black box is there. Okay, that's gone now. All right, cool. We'll give it a quick playthrough and start there.
Rico what?
Hairitage.
Look. Yeah. You come with me, I turn you into a pro. I'm not an amateur, I'm sharper than the average cutlery. Commit a massacre. A man of war, steady rocking your scapular. Haters inside a canister, scared of my 40 caliber. Everything I do easy, hella fur coat like kiwi. I ain't got me no Maybach, but I think it's time to go get it. I dug a bitch New Yorkie, niggas be talking, they don't know my story. Soon as I got me a foreign, they started to hate, then I pulled up my 40. I got some haters talking, they been getting root canals. They wanna go to war, I chew them up just like my fingernails. I roll with shotters, fuck a jail, I can't afford the bail, but if I do, they know I get it poppin' like the 40 cal. Poppin'.
On the left.
Okay, I think that's enough. Okay, I see the audio is a lot louder than the mic, so I'm going to bring that down 8 and see if I can even that out a little bit for you. Bring the desktop audio down a little bit. Cool, okay. So I'm thinking drums. I could start with drums. It's a bit of an organizational mastermind, so we can, we'll kind of go through it the best I can. I ended up taking, we'll talk samples too, because I don't mind. I did AFK Kick 6, and I actually split this up between the bottom 100 hertz and the top 100 hertz. I didn't really take it much farther than that, but this kind of gives you the opportunity to adjust the sample separately, splitting the high and low, so you can kind of adjust the sample separately. I don't really do that much anymore, but I have found that you can kind of push it to its limit a little bit more when you have more control over it. And so you can see low end, top end. Nothing too crazy. Use the old transient master. Since then, I've started using the kilohertz one because it's just a better transient overall. It just sounds a million times better. And then we kind of have the hip hop portion kick.
Oh, I'm not an amateur, I'm sharper than the average cutlery.
And that one was just as simple as EQing. I mean, it's very well processed. It's there wasn't a whole lot. So a lot of the time when you deal with a good sample, you're not gonna have to do a whole lot of work. you know, the boosting and cutting and stuff like that is all just based on what you need and what the sample offers, and you kind of adjust from there. Little offbeat pattern with the snare here for the progression.
Get it. I dug a bitch.
And I like elements like that to come in halfway through. I mean, you'll see that quite a bit with my tracks that you know, we'll have the plain introduction with a lot of room here to give you the focus point, and then we'll carry that on with an additional 2 to 3 elements later down the road. We could talk about Rico X vocals too. He gave me a fantastic set. Probably some of the cleanest that I get are from Rico Act, and I can play through that without the processing on it in order to kind of talk about what I did in order to bring it into the mix the way I wanted.
Me, I turn you into a pro. I'm not an amateur. I'm sharper than the average cutlery. Commit a massacre. A man of war, steady rocking your scapular. Haters inside a canister, scared of my 40 caliber.
So there's the raw vocals without my processing on them, and then here's my big old rack of effects.
Yeah, you come with me, I turn you into a pro. I'm not an amateur. I'm sharper than the average cutlery. Commit a massacre. A man of war, steady rocking your scapular. Haters inside a canister, scared.
And my whole objective with this rack, I tend to not be as in-depth with these anymore, but the whole objective was to take the vocal, which was nice and clear, and get a crispiness on top, get it to cut through the mix. You know, with EDM vocals, you're dealing with a lot of volume and a lot of high end and stuff, and you need your vocals to cut through above that. So I wanted to get them really crispy and huge. And these 2 compressors are probably my favorite to accomplish that. This was a rack that I've seen used in hardware applications before from some producers online that do like rock mixing and stuff like that. So I thought I'd give it a try, and was pretty happy with the result. And other than that, you know, there's a little bit of OTT because that tends to, you know, crisp things up a bit. And at least in our industry, it makes sense to do something like that. It's probably something I never would have done outside of, you know, an EDM format. Move on here a little bit. I kept a lot of this centered too, actually. Then there's some, you know, there's some effects and things, but it's very scarce along the vocals themselves. A lot of it's very centered, and then I dealt with mid-side processing to accentuate the vocal within the entire mix. I did stereo-wise, because when you're dealing with a more mono signal, you can use stereo-wise to add side signal in something that doesn't have any side signal. If it was already nice and wide on its own, I would turn that off and then boost whatever's there. But this is a nice way to generate it with vocals, basses, any sort of effect, anything that's sitting in the middle. That is going to benefit that quite a bit. Whether or not it's necessary is up to you, but that is how that works. A bunch of little scattered hat groups. You can see this is something that I had come in halfway through the verse, just to carry along.
My 40 caliber. Everything I do is hella. Fur cold like Kiwi. I ain't got me no Maybach, but I think it's time to go get it. I dug a bitch New Yorkie. Niggas be talking, they don't know my story. Soon as I got me a foreign.
Yeah, so nothing too crazy, just layered. You know, I really love my rides and open hats to kind of fill out space in the back of you know, in the back of a mix, and then you staccato you know, get these really, I don't want to call them staccato, I think that's wrong, but you know, really closed hat to kind of vary things up. And I kept it kind of robotic, but you know, feel free to you know, if you're really trying to build a groove, it's those little elements of things you only hear once or twice that make it memorable and stand out. And, you know, I didn't have to do that here, but that's definitely a practice that I work on more now than I did back when I made this. Let's scroll down a bit further. A couple other things in there, just crashes and stuff to fill out the space. The good old cymatics Raptor stuff too. And these are nice to, you know, there's nothing wrong with doing, you know, a handful of things. It's oftentimes with how big we try to get our mixes in this industry, it makes sense to layer just about anything. So, having a bunch of different stuff is important. Then you're also dealing with phase, and that's kind of been a more recent development for me, is making these slight adjustments. If you're on Ableton, you have this delay compensation here, which is your D on the bottom right. And you can affect an entire group by a little bit in order to offset them. So let's say I have 2 kick transients that aren't fitting. You can slightly adjust them by milliseconds, and that'll allow you to make that fit together better. And you ultimately end up with a stronger kick. And a lot of time, I'd say 9 times out of 10, you're going to do some sort of phase adjustment if both those transients are starting at the exact same point. They don't just magically fit together. There's some sort of adjustment you can do in order to make those fit better. Hats are a little bit more forgiving. You tend to be in the top spectrum, and everything kind of just it gels a little different. It tends to be your low end that is going to suffer from that a lot more. Let's move on a little bit here. We could spend a lot of time in basses without a problem. Yeah, for some reason I have an effects group mixed in with this whole thing, but okay, we will pop in. Let's go start with the first bass. So lots of repeated, well, not lots of repeated, but few repeated effects and some filtering and stuff like that automates in and out just to carry the song along. We have my preset here. Now this I'm pretty sure from the way the effects are that this was a preset that I modified. I just was throwing random samples into here in order to find a new groove, and then probably adjusted some of these shapes to kind of make it your own, which is pretty common, especially learning how to do stuff. It's going to be imitation. If you're new to sound design and making basses and stuff, the easiest thing you're gonna be able to do is just rip open something and start moving parts around until you start to recognize the changes that you're making and why. And that understanding is ultimately what's going to lead you to developing your own sound or really mastering your craft there. So effects wise, nothing special without the compression and the OTT and the camel crusher and everything. So this, I think, was actually a Ray Volpe thing that he was doing for a bit, where he's probably still doing it, I don't know, but he OTT, camel crusher, OTT, camel crusher, and I've seen him layer it a few times in order to really push his sound forward. And it's pretty effective. There's a lot of the time, when you're dealing with effects, you're never going to actually end up at 100. It's even here, I don't have my mix at 100%. 98% of the time, your effect your dry wet or your intensity is going to be between 0 and 100. But in some cases, you need to go even further than that, and so that's where the layering and things like that really start to take effect. I mean, I've seen OTT come into play, 2 or 3 times in a row, in order to grab artifacts or to do something, in order to accomplish the sound that they're looking for. And again, actually, because of how wide this track is, it's 2 voices. It's 2 voices, and there's no width limiting. I don't know if you've ever used the global tab before, but you can control how wide a sound is with this width here. So if you're doing multiple voices, but your entire song is in the sides as a result, you can dial this back and then focus on the middle of the sound, or grab a utility and solo your left, solo your right, and create a nice mid, and then stereo from there. There's a lot of ways to do it. Serum is notoriously wide, and that is okay. But, you know, understanding that is important to be able to start to, you know, understand why your sounds are sounding the way they do and start to deal with that. After that, I have this thick verb here, which I think is just a bunch of different, I'll try and play it here. So these are a bunch of different layers of stuff that have delays and little tiny snippets of sounds. And I just, I level them out based on what that particular sound benefits from the most, because some of these are too messy and some of these are really clean. And then we have like this one with this. Definitely Haas effect. Yeah, I have it ping-ponging, so it's definitely like a Haas effect type of situation. And I can blend these back in to the dry signal, which is here. It has nothing going on, sitting at 0 dB, so we have no effect there. And this is just a nice way to be able to thicken up a sound if it needs it, with a bunch of different tools that I already have ready to go. So I don't need to sit there and make 4 racks worth of everything, and then some of them are side chained. I don't have to worry about that anymore. I just save this, and then I have it in my user library up here in order to refer to it anytime I need it. After that, let's get all this crap out of the way. Good Lord. I'm using, I don't know why I did this, but here we are. So the reverb. There's a couple things causing reverb, but I decided to exaggerate that a little bit with this washout just barely coming into play, which was not the intended design of that rack. It's designed to wash out and do like a big buildup. But I figured out, you know, if you're using it at 10 to 20%, you can kind of fill out the space of a mix a little bit. Obviously not the most important part. The thick verb seems to be pulling its weight here. But, you know, those little layers matter when you're working on it, and sometimes they don't always translate over. You know, nobody else is probably going to notice that except for you, but that's fine. And some mid-side EQing. I could not explain to you why I did this. There's probably a hellish resonant peak right there at 8K. My 8 to 10 range tends to be my problem area. I get really excited and put these bright mixes in, and then I go listen to it in my car, and I wonder why the fuck anybody gives me money. But yeah, so I dealt with that in post. And then the EQ is a little bit of shaping in order to fit it in with the song and kind of glue it together. So probably everything up until these two effects, those are necessary for the sound. And then these two effects are really necessary for the mix and getting everything to gel and make sense. You know, the sound probably sounds fine without these EQs here. Yeah, but in context of the mix, I needed to add those in order to get it to make sense. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, my chat died. 1 second. Oops. There we go. Same as before, the little concept with adding second half elements. That's really what these little bit crushed guys are. So these two kind of carry the whole progression along. Yeah, so as opposed, you know, I could have modified the original sound and, you know, varied it up. I've done that quite a bit. You can change the FM, or you could change the positioning of your wavetable in order to shake it up for the second half. But I'm big on loop patterns and things, right? I have a lot of call and response, and the easiest way for me to evolve that is to vary up the sounds that already exist. You know, I don't want to bring in a new pattern because those get confusing, or a new melody because it tends to not make sense in the context of my own music. So the best thing I can do is start to vary things up, and adding additional cymbals and stuff, or like an effects blip that hits right at 1 that you never hear again. Those kinds of things are very important to carry on a song as well. So if you're wondering, okay, why do I have this cool loop and it just sounds like it's dragging on, but it's only 30 seconds? Well, you know, add some other elements. And if you don't know what's supposed to go there, just throw shit at the wall until it sticks. You know, there's no wrong answer. You throw something on, it either works or it doesn't, and you know, there's no wrong answer till you try it. We'll get down to yeah, this is the beefy boy. This is the star of the show. I'm pretty sure I got this from a YouTube tutorial on how to do it, and I just kind of switched it up. But somebody figured out how to make that tone, and I think the biggest thing was that inverted LFO shape. It wasn't triangular. You know, it tends to be when you work on songs, you know, you're dealing with that, or you're dealing with that kind of shape. And here, you know, they had it very finely tuned, you know, this way. And it gave it that air. And then when you push that into effects, oh my God, my rack is terrible. Yeah, I ended up taking a bunch of stuff out, I suppose, but that's fine. You throw that into, yeah, Camel Crusher, some EQs. There's actually no OTT. That's interesting. Sometimes the nature of the sound needs to be able to breathe, and OTT is the one thing you can put into a mix that will not let that happen. So, you know, I use this quite a bit. I vary up the timing. I have little slight modifications and stuff that I've learned from some other people over the years, but this is not the end all be all. This does not belong on everything, and despite the fact that other sounds in the mix have that, you know, this one didn't need it, and that's totally okay. The other thing I did is I washed this out to let it progress through the, you know, it's very plain and repetitive, so I just have it fade out. That's something you'd hear a lot with, like, I hear a lot with, like, Eliminate. He's very good at, like, bringing reverbs and stuff in and out to create, you know, a vibe and a groove, and that's always some of my favorite shit. In the second drop, I basically just modified this original sound and turned it into like an FM, like kind of a screech. Actually, it might not even be FM. Oh, it is. Yeah, no, nailed it. Yeah, it's just a sustain based on the same idea, but I eliminated the LFO as a whole, and then just kept the pitch bending in there. You can hear the pitch bending. I do like if I can't get the right tone, like I don't like the buzz underneath this. This is the root of the screech, and if I don't like the sound of that, I can drop it down. So technically that's like too low of a sound. You're kind of in your like C-1 range or like an E-1, and that tends to lose the definition of the sound. It gets too low for it to play a note correctly. But in this context, your note is coming from B, and when you FM that into it, it's still high. It's way higher, so it's playing the actual note across it, and you know, you can end up with some textures. I'm sure, like, some of the more guttural sounding bass design is following the same principle. It's not so much that it's playing the appropriate note, but you can get that tone by kind of playing below what's normally acceptable tonally. And if you just play with the filtering and stuff, you can end up with some really interesting stuff. Then I layered that, just a little saw underneath. And that does good to just, you know, fill out the rest of the space. Sometimes that's necessary, sometimes that's not. I mean, some of my favorite music, it's just the lead and the bass, and then there's a little bit of, you know, minimal hat work and drums going on in order to carry the idea. You know, so it is all about context and what the objective is. You know, you don't feel like you have to add these little things in just because somebody else did it. Moving on. Some little fades and stuff to carry stuff in, you know, if this was gone. Those little bits that you really have to think about. They don't just appear. Those really bring in the emphasis on things. It's kind of this oh shit sound before you come in, to the main meat of your idea. So those are very important to include. But again, those things don't just show up. You kind of have to think about them in context to your song and say, okay, does this need this? How do I create it? I think this one is just a big reverb I made from a previous element of the song, and then you just freeze it and reverse it. There's a million tutorials on that if you don't know how to do it. But it's just it's just as simple as that. And then there's little things. This is not even really in the song at all, but little background sounds. Oh, that's fun. I forgot about this. So this actually follows the auto pan follows the exact pattern of the lead. And I probably did that because without it, it's too overpowering in the gaps between the lead. Exactly, yeah. So in order for it to fit with the song, I could sit there and try and mess with it, but I figured out that automating the siren and just making it fit with the lead kind of glued it together. Not something I normally would have done, but it ended up working out great in this context. And then Tynan riser in here. I stretched the shit out of that. Look at that. It just you can barely hear it, but you miss it. You miss it when it's gone. So I keep those in there. It's just nice little bits of ear candy, and sometimes they translate to people, and sometimes they don't. But I love those little things. Those little things can easily make a track go from, pretty normal into just absolutely phenomenal. Let's see what else we got going on. I think effects. This is just a bunch of samples. I don't do this as much anymore. I tend to, at least the leading element. So I've got this thing is kind of the front and center. Sounds fantastic. It is becoming increasingly harder to find elements like this in just sample libraries that make sense to your song. So I found it easier to just synthesize them. So I would go in and in an hour when this loads, oh my God, I would hop in and it's just as simple as creating a volume, or not a volume, a pitch shape all the way across. And this is extra useful because you can develop this in the root note of the song.
I got some haters talking, they've been getting root canals. They wanna go to war, I chew them up just like my fingernails. I roll with shot as fuck a jail.
Yeah, so and it doesn't take a whole lot of time. It doesn't need a whole lot of attention because it's a background element. It is something that you can accomplish very easily, and you can get a lot farther ahead with it as opposed to just digging through samples and trying to get out of it what you want. And then, of course, we filtered the whole thing. The whole thing.
I got some haters talking, they've been getting root canals. They wanna go to war, I chew them up just like...
Whole thing is a big low pass all the way coming in, and I even did it on the vocal, which worked really good in context of the song. Not so much in the DJ world. I very much, and the way I solved that problem is I start layering in the other track with that buildup in order to kind of bring everything together. I feel like it drops the room, it drops the floor out of the room the way that I want it to. But sometimes when you're in a festival and your whole mix is super high energy, and then you drop into this, it kind of doesn't move. It doesn't catch people the right way. So I've had to be very tricky about that in a live setting. But regardless, I made it because I liked it. I made it because it worked fine. It's just something I noticed within the live performance spectrum that I've kind of had to get creative about how I blend it in order for me to be happy with it in the live setting. So sometimes you'll take your song and you'll edit it later and you'll put a more DJ friendly buildup or something like that and do sort of a live edit. House music's very famous for doing that with like extended mixes. They add a whole minute of boring drums in the front of their song in order for it to just make more sense as a DJ, because you can start to blend the idea in. And the same thing goes for this. There's no real rules to it. I think just about anybody that you listen to that knows their way around entertaining with an EDM, they're doing something extra to their songs. There's definitely nothing wrong with that. Take a look here. Subgroup. We've got just an init triangle, no effects at all. And then it's pitching down 12 and creating a bit of a...
Started to hate that I pulled out my 40. I got some haters talking, they've been getting rookie nails. They wanna... I roll with shotters, fuck a jail. I can't afford the bill, but if I do, they know I get it poppin' like the 40 cal.
And these are nice to just...
I got some haters talking, they've been getting rookie nails. They wanna go to war, I chew them up just like my fingernails. I roll with shotters.
Like a lot of tension exists in the high end and how you process that, but I think some of my favorite buildups I hear from people like Company and just everybody in the dubstep scene, that they're doing these huge low ends and really bringing in that alongside the high end tension, and it really creates like a big anthemic effect that I think should be emulated. Drop sub. Hello, Warhawk. Drop sub is same idea, but I think we're pitching it down with something. There's a tool in here that you can do the master tuning on this guy. Yeah, so you can tune your master tuning, which you can only create in the Matrix. For some reason, there's no actual control for it other than here. And then you can control the output. You can aux source it and everything. But that's what I did here. Nothing wrong with having a pitching bass. I mean, a lot of groove will come from just the sub moving in any direction. It does not just have to be static, and that's a really good way to bring it to life, because it doesn't need to just be like a root note trap sub type of thing. It can have some room to move. Depending on the context of the song, it doesn't necessarily need to fit a key either. If you're dealing with a lot of atonal stuff, like very common with rhythm, it doesn't really matter what the sub ends up as long as it sounds good. And then you just got to be careful about bringing it back into a melodic context later. Let's say your verse goes back into this whole thing that's all in key and everything. You obviously don't want your sub coming in there messing that up. But those movements are very important to creating some vibe and some groove in your track. And then same thing. Sounds absolutely wretched by itself, but in the context of the mix, it's important. It has this weird click, which I'm sure is Serum's fault. The faster you go with these LFOs, the more dumb stuff starts to happen. But most of the time, it ends up being fine. I've had it start phasing before and stuff like that. But if that were to be an issue, I'd probably just throw in an auto pan and do it in Ableton, so that way the phase and the sound quality is not an issue. Let's see. But yeah, so that just follows along. That just follows along with the lead, and creates a nice floor that has a lot of room because of how bright the rest of the song is. Has a lot of room to kind of create a big effect. The shape of the mix has a lot to do with how loud your sub feels. Yeah. you notice in this range, there's not a whole lot going on. There's not a whole lot going on in this area. So that kind of gives the sub the sub room to exist and thrive and punch through the mix. You know, the more you start to bring in some of these elements, like these harmonic areas, you would start to lose the definition. That's why you'd hear like when you're playing a really low saw bass, you tend to have to go the extra mile in order to get the fundamental, like the sub frequency to cut through on a sub, because the saw is saturating your every frequency there. And a lot of the time you need to deal with that, you know, with effects in order to really bring in that fundamental. And that could get tricky because it's very difficult to bring that out. Now, when you're playing that on a festive, like a big system, that tends to not matter as much. Those systems are designed to play everything and drive the mix. But, you know, when you're dealing with headphones, the more content you have in that range, the harder the headphone's going to have, the harder time your headphones are going to have in order to play that fundamental. So I do like, with these types of sounds, making sure I have that room, and that the sub can come in and do its thing. And then, you know, when I do have a really crunchy, you know, low mid type of bass, you know, I'll tend to, you know, just deal with it accordingly. Well, somehow we made it through the whole mix here. I know I didn't touch on every single element, but I think I got the gist of the points that I wanted to come across. I think I didn't talk about the snare too much, but there's really nothing important here. It's just it's same as the layer concepts we were talking about before, a little bit of processing, but I did vary up the samples. And this jingle bell, that's my shit. That's my shit now. So I popped this project back open after about a year and realized, oh my God, I never actually I forgot about it. So now I have it in my little extras folder. Also, if you're not organizing your samples, I'd start today. That makes a huge difference to have some go-to stuff that you can check on. You can also, if you're looking for new ideas and you're looking for a snare, you can sort by date modified, and whatever new things you got out of Splice, whatever new things you get out of Splice or anything, those are all going to be available here. And you know, if you're just trying to come up with something and you don't really have a direction yet, that's a pretty nice way to be able to get some ideas down. Obviously, the search function's weird because if somebody doesn't label it as what you're looking for, you're never going to find it. I've had that problem with effects and stuff. A lot, but this is a great way to get your baseline elements down, or your core elements, mind you, without dealing with too much. Yeah, I think that's about everything on this track. It's definitely popped off the way that I did not expect, and I'm very grateful with Never Say Die and those guys for that. You know, if anybody has some questions, you know, feel free to pop them in the chat, but I'll probably just brush through this a little bit more, and if nothing else, we'll just call it a wrap. I'll go through the master too while we're waiting for questions. I did a pretty aggressive boost here on the sub and on the high end, and just kind of created a pocket here in your low mids to mids. And again, that is, you know, putting more focus on the sub and the high end, and that tends to be a pretty energetic shape. But it's not always necessary. You know, there's nothing that you can look at on this master channel right now that is anything you need to emulate. It's all based on context. And the one thing you need to do more than anything, especially if you're starting out, is make sure that this thing sounds good without any effects, without any help, because the more you rely on your master while you're still working on the project, the more you're starting to not deal with the issues in the mix. This should be the final little, you know, don't ice the cake if your cake's not done. If it's just a soupy mess on the ground and you throw frosting on it, you're fucked. It's not going to work. But other than that, I mean, it's not too complicated. There's a little bit more shaping with EQing, which really just tells me I probably should have focused on the mix a little bit more, but it ended up being okay. Little bit of dynamic compression. I don't use this anymore, and it's not because it sucks. It's just because I deal with all my compression in the mix, and that ends up being the solution. A little bit of exciter. This kind of work. I mean, this can do something, but if you're pushing your mix without the master, you're probably never going to need this. This could be for, if I'm dealing with like a quieter mix, like something more minimal, and I need to the mix sounds great, but I need to bring it forward. This would be the solution. But when you're making dubstep, that thing's probably going to be loud as shit before it touches any master processing, and that's fine. And your process may be different. That's okay too. There really isn't a wrong way to do this. There's just the steps that you figure out along the way that make sense for you. And then of course we clip the piss out of it with the limiter and the soft clipper here. I turn the soft clipping on, and then I will use a limiter to bring up the last. For some reason, this soft clipper stops at 0.5, and so I bring it up a little bit just to bring the mix up to 0. But I split the load between a limiter and a soft clipper because I didn't like how much the soft clipper is clipping, and I did not like how much the limiter was limiting, and so I kind of split the load between the two and came up even. I don't know how common that is anymore. I feel like a lot of people are just clipping their mixes and sounding way louder than I can, but yeah, that's generally the master. Also recommend BX meters. Any sort of RMS or LUFS metering is important, way more important than peak, because it's really going to give you an idea of how squashed or unsquashed your song is, because a peak will hit at 0 and it doesn't tell you shit about where you're at. So that's something to focus on too. I see some questions here. Thanks so much. Thank you so much. Never say die. Where's the kick from? AFK kick 6. I don't know, actually. I mean, it obviously came from AFK, but I don't know if it's a pack on Splice or how I got it from him. But yeah, he's a homie. So yeah, I would check Splice. There's so many good packs out now. You just you could sort by popular, or you could just hit random and end up finding a gold mine. See if, do you ever start with a preset on your masters while you produce? Never. Well, okay, I used to. I used to have a soft clipper, and I was like, yeah, everyone push your mix into this. The thing I've learned is that the more you influence how your mix changes based on what you're adding and taking away, meaning the more stuff I add, the more compression starts to happen, and then I'm EQ shaping in the master, the more I'm distorting the mix in order for it to sound good. And if I'm boosting 6 dB on my high end on the master, and then I throw another element in like a hi-hat, well, that hi-hat's already too loud. So now I'm adjusting the hi-hat unnecessarily. So what I've learned is don't touch anything and get it to sound good alone. The best collaborations I've had so far with producers, I think higher than myself, they when I listen to their track and it's like 6 dB down because they haven't mastered it yet, or they haven't pushed it through any processing, it all sounds fucking incredible. It's immaculate, and that is ultimately that you got to think of it in granular focus. You have to be able to work on every single thing independently to get it all fit together, because there's nothing you can do on the master that's going to make up for two frequencies clashing too much or anything like that. That's not going to have a permanent repercussion on the rest of the elements of your mix. So don't focus on it. Take the time to touch every single element of this 110 track behemoth that you've come up with, and you're going to end up with a better result. It's going to take you longer, but you should not be worried about pace. You should be worried about, fucking changing the game with a cool concept and then getting it to sound as good as you can. See, how'd I link up with Rico? I don't remember. I think it was a Facebook conversation. Like, hey, let's fucking work one day. I got these vocals from him years ago as just kind of a random opportunity showed up, and this is actually the second or third attempt to get this track to work with his vocals, and not because his vocals were bad. It's just I couldn't come up with any ideas that were translating well, and I ended up taking his vocals out, starting the project over, I think 2 times, just starting from scratch and taking nothing but his vocals and just giving it another go before I ended up with this. And I'm so glad I did that, and I took the time and ignored the headache and frustration of throwing a project out, because it paid off. It paid off great. I mean, this thing came out really nice, and we got a lot of opportunities as a result. Kill the Noise just said something on Twitter that I liked, which was, it doesn't matter how long you spent on it if it's not good. So, it just because I put 30 hours into that other idea doesn't mean it's worth anything. Doesn't mean it needs to happen. Do I know any free Lufs meters? Ulean has the free one. The Ozone stuff has it built in. So if you end up like renting Ozone, I know you can do that on Splice. There is a way to, so this normally says RMS. But if you change it to short term, it's a Lufs meter. I don't know why they labeled it that way. It's dumb, and I don't get it, but that is there. Lufs is slightly more reliable than RMS, but to be honest with you, it's so minimal that I don't care. I generally just go off RMS and I'm fine. As long as you understand your mix shape and why it's as loud as it is. For example, if your song is much more low-endy, you can kind of push that a little bit farther without it getting piercing, where Lufs is going to kind of tell you, hey, this is really loud in like the elements of your ear that, is going to hurt. So if you have a really bright mix, your Lufs are going to be a little bit higher than your RMS meter. But it's I don't want to call it negligible, but it's not essential. A normal song, I actually don't know. I think I'll tend to work on things over the course of a month, but I'll have 3 to 4 projects going at the same time, to keep moving, and I'll just keep producing that way. Because if I get stuck on something and I don't have an answer for it right away, I can just pop over to another idea and start on that. And there's that's the way that a lot of people end up getting to finish songs, because not everything you do is going to get finished, and not everything you do is going to be releasable. And it doesn't matter if you're fucking me or Skrillex or anybody. There's stuff that gets made where it's like, this just isn't getting released. And there's nothing wrong with that. But what I do is, I'll work on 3 to 4 tracks or even 5 at a time, and I'll rotate through them, and they tend to get done over a course of a month. Some of them have taken over that. I mean, the Rico Act project was probably in folders for over a year before I ended up making something where it was like ready to go. And and that's fine too. It's difficult to maintain a pace, but it is easy to set yourself up ahead of time. Let's say you're just launching a brand, for example. The one thing I'd recommend is have 5 or 6 songs ready to go that are already perfect and release ready. Schedule those out, and as that release schedule happens, now you keep producing. Now you keep working on additional ideas and stuff. Because if you have one fire idea and you come out with it and you have yet to write the rest, it's going to take you forever to come up with those ideas, and then you don't necessarily have a home for it. You don't necessarily have a release plan. There's got to be artwork for it. There's got to be, this whole industry is a social media content war now. It's not like it was 10 years ago where you could just make a banger and suddenly you take off. There are some people that do that, but there's a lot of strategy that goes into circulating your music now that is essential to get ahead. And I can blame that on nothing other than everybody's really good at their shit now. So you got to do what you got to do in order to stand out. And there's nothing wrong with that. You play the game a little bit and you're creative and you kind of just be online and be vulnerable and present yourself or your idea. And if you have a quality idea or you have something innovative, it's gonna pay off. Let me see those one shots at the beginning of the drop. Look who's late. It's Revlo. All right, say hi to Revlo in the chat if y'all are still here with me. Let me find this for him. You're talking these hits. We'll go back to this briefly. It's literally just a preset I ripped up from another pack, threw my own effect in, and just made a whole bunch OTP Candy Crush. But yeah, nothing too crazy there. But yeah, I think that covers everything. You know, if there are some questions that you run into later, if you're working on some stuff, you know, shoot me a message on Instagram or Twitter, and you know, more than happy to help talk through some stuff. Lessons may or may not become a thing in the future. I don't know if I'm allowed to advertise that or not, but you know, yeah, more than happy to help. There's definitely a lot of complicated stuff with this, but you know, I spent a good 7 or 8 years banging my head against the wall before this stuff started to make sense. And, you know, there's no reason why that knowledge can't get passed down and get to, you know, get people going a lot quicker. But anyway, I'm going to take that opportunity to sign off. Thank you again. Never Say Die for the opportunity. Thank you guys for tuning in. And I will catch you at the next one. Thank you.